my granddaughter whispered, "Let's pretend we're leaving." And then I discovered an amazing truth. Jack watched Emma's eyes sparkle with mischief as she tilted her head. Superficially, it was just a game. But in that quiet Ohio afternoon, the weight of what she suggested cut deeper. In a world where their conversations were often mired in academic frustration and social pressures, the prospect of a pretend departure felt like a thrilling escape. But with every ounce of joy in her voice, Jack felt the undertow of regret gnawing at him. Had he prepared her for the world? As they wandered into the attic, the air thick with dust and nostalgia, each box they opened unleashed a flood of memories. Old family photographs, faded letters, remnants of laughter echoed through the dim space. Jack could practically hear the whispers of his past. But would Emma even care? Thoughts spiraled in his mind. Would she find any relevance in the struggles that shaped their family? He paused, holding a box marked with his father's initials, hesitation creeping in. Inside lay letters from an era of hardship, detailing the fight for education during the Great Depression. Reading them felt like a punch in the gut. Pride mingled with regret. His father had sacrificed so much, and here Jack was, doubting he could inspire the same tenacity in Emma. The looming threat of cut funding for arts at school left him simmering in panic. He had seen how fragile dreams could be snuffed out, like fireflies trapped in a jar. Would Emma navigate her fears, fueled by the creative spirit Jack once cherished? Or would she collapse under the weight of societal expectations? Before they continued, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jack held the letters with trembling hands, fear twisting in his gut. What if he hadn't equipped Emma for this world? The ache in his chest deepened as he considered how fragile ingenuity could be when overlooked. Yet its importance loomed large. It was everything his father fought for. All that Jack had ever taught. He understood now that it was not just about survival. It was about thriving, about creating meaning beyond mere existence. This newfound realization steeled Jack's resolve. He couldn't just hope for change any longer. He had to fight. As he approached the school board presentation that loomed ahead like a storm cloud, his heart raced. Each step felt heavy, faced with a sea of unfamiliar expressions. This confrontation would shape their futures, anchor their arguments in the harsh light of reality, or let their voices disappear into apathy. Just as he prepared to speak, a chill trickled down his spine as he recognized a familiar face in the audience among the board members, the one he had never wanted to confront. Doubt clawed at him. Would he be heard this time? As tension filled the room, Jack felt the grip of history sealing his fate. Would the past come to their aid? Or would they stand alone against an indifferent world? Jack took a deep breath, the air in the room suffocating. He felt the whisper of history hovering around him as he focused on the faces before him. Each board member seemed to represent a gatekeeper of sorts, bodies that held power over creativity, the arts, and student futures. With every blink, he questioned if he had the strength to open his mouth. The familiar face he dreaded was only a few rows ahead. A figure from his past, someone who had never believed in him, someone who had often ridiculed his passion for art. Rage ignited within him, but Jack forced it down. This was not about personal vengeance. It was about Emma, about every student who deserved a chance to express themselves freely. Drawing upon the letters cradled between his fingers, he exhaled, letting their weight remind him why he was there. He had learned long ago that words could move mountains, but they had to be wielded with intention. He stepped forward. "I stand here today not just for myself, but for my granddaughter and every student who feels unseen." He began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his heart. Silence enveloped the room, punctuated only by the scratching sounds of pens on paper. I remember stories from my father's difficult times. How he fought for education, for creativity, for the right to express oneself. Each word drew him deeper into the passion he had kept at bay for too long. Art isn't merely an extra, it's essential. It fuels the mind and nurtures the soul. By cutting funding, you're not just stripping programs away. You're dimming the lights of hope in our children's eyes. He saw heads nodding, some perhaps familiar with the struggle he had endured, some curious about the face of this determined grandfather. Jack felt a crack forming in the wall of doubt. He pressed on. We're living in a landscape where conformity often reigns supreme, yet creativity is the bedrock of progress. If education is meant to prepare our children for the world, then it must also equip them with the extraordinary ability to envision and create that world. With a flicker of courage igniting within him, he glanced towards the familiar face, willing its owner to acknowledge the truths he spoke. How did one convincingly confront someone who had dismissed your dreams? Risk loomed large, yet so did the chance to inspire change, however incremental it might be. Imagine a classroom where every student is encouraged to express their unique ideas, fostering innovation rather than compliance. They should be taught how to question, to create not just in art, but in all avenues of life. His voice grew stronger, each remark fueled by the thoughts of Emma and her boundless potential. As he concluded, he considered the gravity of his words rippling through the audience. He had laid everything bare, his hopes, fears, and commitment to his granddaughter's future. He felt raw, yet alive, ignited by purpose. But the tension in the air remained palpable. Jack understood that words did not automatically equate to change. The board deliberated, whispers floating among them, and Jack clenched his fists, uncertainty gnawing at him once more. Had he done enough? Had he ignited a fire, or had he merely sown seeds into indifferent soil? Seconds stretched into eternity, and he realized that the fight was not over. It had only begun. Whatever the outcome of that meeting, one thing was certain. He would rally again. This was just the start of a much larger battle, not just for Emma's future, but for every child dreaming of a canvas filled with potential. And just when Jack believed clarity might settle in, a motion caught his eye. Another board member stood up, his expression unreadable. Jack braced himself for what would come next, as he sensed the air crackle with the weight of impending revelations. What would this unexpected turn bring? The board member adjusted his glasses, the sunlight catching their reflective surface in a way that made Jack's heart race. Was this member's face harder to read, or just as clouded with skepticism as the others? In that moment, Jack couldn't discern if his response would herald support, or condemn him to silence once more. "Mr. Green," the board member began, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "You've brought a passionate argument today. However, I must remind you of our responsibility to allocate resources judiciously. What you propose requires not only funding, but a paradigm shift in our educational values. Do you believe this shift is feasible? Do you have a plan?" The targeted question astonished Jack. It was one thing to speak from the heart. It was another entirely to offer measured solutions. His previous speeches had been filled with emotion, but now it was time for substance. Feasible. Jack echoed, his mind racing to conjure a tangible vision. For the first time, he considered not just the emotion of what he wanted, but the reality of how to achieve it. "I believe it is. With the right guidance, we can implement a mentorship program. Artists from our community could engage directly with students, providing workshops that aren't just limited to traditional techniques. We could foster a culture where creativity is woven intricately into the fabric of learning. As he spoke, Jack began to see the theory of his ideas crystallizing into something practical. He thought of Emma, of the vibrant creativity she brimmed with, and how much more she could thrive in a supportive environment. His resolve strengthened. "What about the budget?" interrupted another member, arms crossed and expression skeptical. "That sounds great in theory, but where do you propose we cut corners to fund such an initiative? Programs are already stretched thin." Jack's breath hitched. He had expected resistance, but not the immediacy of doubt, aimed directly at the heart of his vision. Yet this was no time to retreat. In silence, he visualized Emma's hopeful face, and the determination surged. "What if we partnered with local businesses? They could sponsor these workshops, exchanging visibility for investment in our students. And we could adapt existing classes, integrating arts into our sciences and math programs, making creativity a core skill, rather than an ancillary one." As Jack spoke, ideas began to spark in the room. Whispers grew louder, a tone of approval weaving through the dissent. He saw the benefit of advocacy not just in speaking, but in solution composing. An unexpected revelation that perhaps what he had lacked all along was a clear strategy tied to his passion. The board member nodded slowly. "Interesting concept. I'd like to see it fleshed out further. You mentioned engaging the community. Would you take on such a project? Perhaps gather support outside your presentation today?" Jack's chest tightened again, but this time it was not from fear. It was from the thrill of possibility. "Yes, I can do that." The words flowed easily, fueled by a newfound self-belief. "I will gather support and create a proposal that outlines how we can implement these changes effectively." The room seemed to shift as the energy transformed. Suddenly he was no longer the uncertain grandfather pleading for funding. He was becoming a champion for creativity and change. A venture that had been deeply personal was morphing into a collective mission, one that required him to step beyond his own fears and insecurities. But then another board member stood, their brow furrowed. "You've offered some valid points, but I have to ask, what ensures this isn't yet another flavor of the month? A fleeting interest that dies off without rooted commitment?" The question ignited an unsettling doubt in Jack's stomach. Could he prove to them that he was committed enough to carry this through? The time had come to face not just the doubts of a board, but the depths of his own resolve. Would he rise to the challenge, or let this moment slip from his grasp? The words lingered in the air like a challenge, igniting Jack's mind with doubts that he had long suppressed. He had spent his career working within the confines of established systems, but this new path required a daring leap into the unknown. What if this was just another fleeting idea? No, he couldn't let this slip. Gathering his thoughts, he focused on the board member's piercing gaze. "The difference lies in the commitment," he replied, steering the conversation with unexpected assertiveness. "I am personally invested in this initiative, not just as an idea, but as a transformation in our educational structure. I will involve parents, local artists, and students as stakeholders. This isn't a one-man job. It's about creating a culture where creativity thrives, because we've established a shared investment in this dream." Jack felt a shift within himself, as if he had unearthed a core conviction that had been buried under years of compromise and cautious patience. He had always known the creative spirit deserved a platform, but now he was positioning himself at the forefront of that cause. He visualized the workshop he'd started years ago, filled with passion and energy, and felt invigorated by the possibilities that lay ahead. The board members seemed momentarily taken aback, considering Jack's words with a careful nod. Jack took this as a cue to dig deeper. I'll be proposing a phased approach to this program. Initially, we can conduct a pilot workshop series funded by local businesses, demonstrating its impact. Once we showcase tangible outcomes, we can present those results back to the board to secure further funding. More murmurs arose, this time tinged with curiosity. Jack's heart raced, each beat striking a note of hope. Perhaps they were starting to grasp his vision. Yet, lingering doubts nagged at the edges of clarity. What if he backtracked? What if he spoke too boldly and pushed too hard, only to face rejection again? But within that tumult of thoughts, he found solace in the mission. Emma's face resurfaced in his mind, her beaming smile when she painted or drew. He envisioned her surrounded by mentors who nurtured her talent blossoming under their guidance. The sheer thought reignited his determination, propelling him forward. Let's not settle for an ephemeral program. Let's cultivate something sustainable, he emphasized, seeking to convey urgency and passion. This is about a legacy. To leave our students with skills they can wield throughout their lives, not just in the classroom, but in every facet of adulthood. Imagine an entire generation empowered by creativity. Jack glanced at the board members, their expressions evolving from skepticism to intrigue. A palpable change enveloped the room as his words wove a fabric of shared idealism. Still, there was a lurking fear within him, a shadow of uncertainty. What if they saw him merely as an emotional grandfather, a dreamer without evidence? The prospect of failure loomed, and he struggled against it. He was prepared to gather support, to flesh out the vision. But what if it didn't succeed despite all his efforts? Mr. Green, if this indeed becomes feasible, I believe we'll need a concrete framework for engagement. The board member who had initially questioned him remarked, a critical tone woven through their voice. How do we prevent this from becoming yet another transient interest? The question cut deep, triggering Jack's resolve. Could he ensure continued commitment? In that moment, clarity struck. If he truly believed this could impact countless lives, he had to rise to this challenge. Taking a deep breath, he decided, I can host community forums that invite feedback and encourage active participation in the program's development. I'll keep the conversation going and seek accountability at every step. I'll ensure it remains living in our schools through an open dialogue. The intensity of the meeting heightened as he defiantly laid out the ideas, each assertion solidifying his newfound confidence. For the first time, he didn't just advocate for art and learning as disparate entities. He fought for their essential place within the educational ethos. He understood now. This wasn't simply an initiative, but an opportunity to reclaim his lost conviction. But as he stood before the board, filled with a mix of determination and dread, he faced a gnawing realization. The real challenge lay ahead, where obstacles would surely test his mettle and resolve. How could he ensure this was not merely a fleeting moment, but a new beginning? The air thickened with anticipation as he prepared to accept the task at hand. As the board members looked at him, questions beyond funding buzzed like static in the atmosphere. Could Jack truly create the sustainable change he envisioned? The moment of truth loomed, and it was only just beginning. As Jack exited the boardroom, an electric current surged beneath his skin. The discussions had ignited something primal in him, but with it came the weight of expectations, his own, and those cast by others. He had calloused himself against doubt, yet this endeavor now demanded that he embrace vulnerability. Leaving the building, he stepped into a fresh dawn, the streetlights flickering off as day broke. His mind raced. What would his next steps be? He needed to gather insights from the community, yet the thought spurred another wave of anxiety. Was he equipped for such exploration? Jack halted at the crosswalk and exhaled by the depth of his uncertainty, acknowledging the doubts circling like vultures around the provocation of not only his vision, but also his professional identity. Encouraged by the newfound commitment, Jack took every step toward home as an opportunity to formulate concrete plans. He envisioned the forum in vivid detail, the lively discussions, the passionate exchanges of ideas that could intertwine lives together. How could he ensure that every voice was not just heard, but valued? He grappled with setting up an environment that fostered authenticity. Tension coiled tightly in his chest at the thought of navigating criticism. He remembered the board members' critical tone and how challenging it would feel to face a crowd, to invite potential rejection head-on from those he sought to uplift. But was this fear a signal of trepidation or a chance to grow? Jack mentally listed those he could enlist. He reached out to Amanda, his former colleague known for her engaging teaching style. She had a talent for bringing even the most reluctant participants into the conversation. As he dialed her number, his palms grew sweaty, uncertainty flooding his mind. What if she rejected his proposal? What if she deemed it unworthy of her time? "Hey, Amanda, it's Jack." He stumbled over his words, the face in his mind hesitating to share the true depth of his aspirations. "I was wondering if you'd be interested in collaborating on a pilot initiative I'm exploring. It's about fostering creativity in our schools." "Jack, I've wondered when you'd finally reach out for something ambitious." Amanda's voice lifted in excitement, a balm to Jack's anxiety. "Tell me more." As Jack explained his vision, his enthusiasm unfurling with each sentence, he felt each connection solidify into a robust plan. Amanda's insight sparked new ideas and ignited his determination. They could co-host a series of forums together, creating a dynamic space for dialogue, considering inputs from parents as well as students. After hanging up, energized and thrilled, he realized he was slowly weaving a fabric of connections that could redefine his trajectory. It was no longer just a solitary dream. There was momentum. Yet beneath that exhilaration skittered whispers of doubt. What if the community engagement fell flat? What if the program failed to take root? The question kept surfacing. Was he truly capable of nurturing this fragile seed of change into something potent? And more importantly, could he handle the backlash if it didn't materialize as he envisioned? With his day mulled over with brainstorms, he walked into his home, greeted by Emma's gleeful chatter as she designed a colorful poster. The scene unfurled a reminder of the purpose behind his mission. Emma's delight mirrored the potential he envisioned within all students at risk of being overlooked in educational systems. Jack glanced down at her artwork, the childlike strokes embodying unfiltered creativity. This should be the experience he filters into the forums. The pure, unrestrained enthusiasm of creation unfettered by boundaries. But faced with the gravity of formalizing this venture, the weight of responsibility pressed down, anew. He knew that each moment he spent strategizing could mean failure for many. Anxiety surged with the realization that he was stepping onto a battlefield of ideals and expectations. As this epiphany echoed within him, a simple whisper from Emma reverberated in his mind. "Let's pretend we're leaving." The words unfurled a new perspective. Perhaps the act of pretending was a powerful tool in transforming aspirations into reality. This masquerade of courage became a pivotal shift. What if he stepped into this role with intention, authentic but unmoored by the outcome? The risk rested in embracing the possibility of failure while fully committing to the attempt. The urgency of now hung heavily in the air. As he prepared for their first community forum, Jack recognized what lay ahead was not mere ideation. It would be an expedition into trusting himself and the wider network he sought to build, knowing that the moment of truth transcended expectations. With that understanding, he steadied his breath. Could embracing vulnerability be the bridge from his fledgling vision to flourishing reality? The stage was set for this dance of creation. But would he summon the courage to step into the spotlight? The sun dipped low in the sky, bathing Jack's workspace in a golden hue as he prepared for the forum. The air was thick with anticipation, his heart racing as he laid out the materials, plywood boards and colorful markers ready to capture ideas. He hesitated, letting his eyes drift to Emma's poster. Vibrant hues of orange, green, and blue danced across the paper, each stroke a vivid reminder of unfiltered imagination. But this was different. There were no crayons in the boardroom, no pure joy infused in the adult conversations he would soon navigate. It was a labyrinth of expectations and mixed agendas, an arena where his vulnerabilities could be laid bare. He felt like an imposter, positioning himself as a guide when, deep down, he was grappling with uncertainty. Still, he embraced the energy swirling within him. Doubt coiled tightly in his stomach, but a flicker of determination ignited. He had already taken the plunge by reaching out to Amanda, and now he had to follow through. The forum wasn't just about him. It was about a symbiosis that could emerge from the collective knowledge of those around him. This realization shifted his perspective. What if he could frame the dialogue not just as an organizer, but as a learner? Perhaps vulnerability was not just an invitation for exposure. It was also an opportunity for growth. His mind raced ahead, envisioning the transformative connection that could spark when participants shared their stories. What if the space encouraged authenticity? He could run discussions that didn't just circulate through prescribed agendas, but instead branched into raw, honest conversations. He jotted down keywords in the margins of his planner: courage, authenticity, connection. Each word resonated, reflecting the very essence of what he desired to cultivate. Jack leaned back in his chair, allowing a moment of clarity to wash over him. He confronted the gnawing doubts, head on. What if no one showed up? What if the discussions felt forced? He could prepare endlessly, meticulously plan every detail. But in the end, all he could control was his willingness to be present. With that realization, he tapped a pen against the desk deliberately, grounding himself in the moment. He had taken the leap to reach out to Amanda, and now he needed to do the same with the community. He set his gaze on the window, recalling the collective energy of the boardroom discussions. He would remind himself of the enthusiasm that had ignited his own commitment, how their ideas had emanated a palpable hope. A hesitant knock on the door jolted him from his reverie. Amanda peeked in, her face bright with a smile. "Ready to tackle this?" she asked, a twinkle in her eye. Nervous laughter escaped him. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Let's use this time to draft some engaging prompts. I want to create an atmosphere where participants feel free to share. We need to catch their hearts before their minds." Her words resonated deeply, offering him a lifeline amidst his anxiety. Together they brainstormed ideas, building off each other's enthusiasm and momentum. As the light in the room shifted, they sketched out themes: nostalgia, creativity, collaboration. Conversations evolved organically as they forged a partnership built on shared aspirations. With each idea that sprang from their dialogue, Jack felt the weight of expectation dissipate. The impending forum no longer appeared as a daunting trial, but rather a shared adventure. The shadows of self-doubt began to recede, revealing a clearer vision of what this endeavor could mean for their community, and for him. Yet beneath this newfound determination, small fears still poked at his conscience. Could he genuinely create a space where everyone felt safe to express their thoughts? What if he miscalculated the mood of the participants? As the sun set, casting long shadows along the walls, Jack grappled with anticipatory excitement and fear. He understood that with the potential for connection came the risk of vulnerability, a duality he would have to steer through. Finally, as they finalized their plans, Amanda turned to him with a serious expression. "We need to be prepared. The success or failure of this isn't just on our shoulders. It's on the choices we make in those critical moments." Jack nodded, the gravity of her statement sinking in. He realized it was more than his own growth at stake. Their willingness to be open to whatever unfolded would determine the impact they could forge. With that weight in mind, Jack inhaled deeply, recognizing that the stand he was about to take wasn't just about facilitating a forum. It was about embracing the unknown, stepping into the role of an active participant, forsaking his fears, and rallying the strength needed to truly connect. The moment of truth was on the horizon. As Jack prepared to lead the forum, one question loomed large. Would he find within himself the resilience to navigate this personal journey and emerge transformed? When Jack arrived at the venue, the atmosphere pulsed with an unspoken tension. The tables were arranged in a circular formation, promoting interaction, yet they seemed to mock him with their empty chairs. He stood at the front, surveying the room, and felt the daunting weight of expectations settle around him like a heavy cloak. This was it. The culmination of everything he'd been preparing for, but the intensity of the moment threatened to overwhelm him. He fidgeted with his planner, shifting his focus to the note cards carefully lined up before him. Each card was a key, a potential unlock to engaging conversations rooted in authenticity. Yet, at that moment, all he could hear in his mind was a cacophony of self-doubt. What if they don't connect? He murmured to himself, almost pleading. Standing beside him, Amanda caught his eye. "Just breathe, Jack. Remember, it's a conversation. Conversations can be beautiful chaos." "Beautiful chaos," he repeated quietly, grasping for the comfort in her words. The doors swung open, and a trickle of participants began to filter in. Their laughter and chatter complemented the warm light spilling into the room, yet the sound bounced off the walls, adding to his anxiety. Jack watched as familiar faces emerged, people he hadn't really invited but who had somehow felt the pull of his endeavor. "Relax," he whispered inwardly, reminding himself this wasn't about him alone. Each participant was a thread woven into a larger tapestry. As they settled into the seats, Jack's heart pounded. He began with an icebreaker, one that Amanda had suggested, aimed at revealing personal stories. "Let's dive right into it. Please share a memory from a time you felt truly connected to someone. What made it special?" Voices flowed as people began to share stories. Jack was amazed by the vulnerability on display. Stories flowed seamlessly, painting a picture of shared experiences punctuated by laughter and nostalgia. It wasn't just his voice over the room anymore. This was a true dialogue unfolding. But beneath the surface, his self-doubt still pulsed fervently. In the midst of a particularly vivid story about a childhood friendship, doubt gnawed at him again. A small voice whispered, "They could have done this anywhere. What do you bring to the table?" Feeling exposed, he stilled the noise momentarily and focused on one participant's animated eyes as she spoke. In that moment, he recognized something profound. It wasn't his role to dominate the conversation. It was to create a conduit through which others could connect. That realization ignited a flicker of empowerment within him. Jack leaned into this newfound clarity, encouraging exchanges that went beyond the surface. What themes resonate from these memories? What connections do they reveal? His voice, initially quaking, now carried weight. Amanda caught his gaze, her smile an anchor amidst the ebb and flow of dialogue. Encouragement radiated from her, fueling his confidence. He exchanged glances with participants, tapping into their energy. Slowly but surely, the structure began to shift from a stagnant meeting to a vibrant exploration of shared humanity. As the conversation deepened, he felt his fears, once looming shadows, dissolve into fragments of understanding. each shared story became a stitch in strengthening the fabric of connection he yearned for. They were in this together. But just as a fresh wave of enthusiasm began to wash over him, the tension reached a breaking point when someone pushed back against the discussion. But what if these connections don't lead anywhere? What if they fall flat? Jack froze, sensing the specter of failure loom again. Would this forum that had begun with so much spark be reduced to futility now? The doubt returned, echoing louder than before. He opened his mouth to respond, unsure of the words to quell the rising tide of dissent. "Let's address that," he said instead, embracing the confrontation. "What makes a connection meaningful? Is it the outcome, or the moment itself?" That question hung in the air like a challenge, a call for authenticity now reverberating within the room. Jack realized the moment was critical, not just for the participants, but for him as well. It was a litmus test, not just of the forum's objective, but of the strength of his approach. Would he shy away from this new tension, or rise to meet it? As participants began expressing their thoughts, he could feel the atmosphere shifting again, but doubts lingered, albeit transformed. The moment of truth drew closer. Would he fortify the connections growing within him, or would the shadows of insecurity pull him back into isolation? As voices collided and ideas sparked, the realization settled in Jack's chest. This was just the beginning, and he was ready to embrace whatever unfolded next. The conversation unfolded with an unpredictable rhythm, laughter punctuating moments of self-reflection. Jack felt the energy of the room waver between uncertainty and eagerness, each voice a note woven into a dynamic symphony. When he posed his question, the atmosphere thickened with contemplation, as though everyone was collectively deciding the weight of the moment. One participant, an older gentleman named Frank, leaned forward, his brow furrowed, eyes sharp. "Connection is about more than the moment, isn't it? If we're not intentional, we're just filling air with words," he interjected, a challenge lacing his tone. Jack's heart raced at the unexpected confrontation. Frank's words hit a nerve, compelling Jack to confront the very essence of what he'd initiated. Was he merely facilitating this experience for the sake of a transient moment? He could almost feel the collective breath held in anticipation, waiting for his response. "Perhaps the moment is only the beginning," Jack replied, his voice steadier than he expected. "Connections can evolve, but they require intention and effort beyond this. Maybe it's about planting seeds, not just having a lovely chat." The room shifted, and slowly, nods of agreement began to fill the space. Jack realized he was not just navigating the group anymore. He was shaping a conversation that might linger beyond these walls. The connection wasn't a product, but a process, one that demanded vulnerability and trust. Amanda's encouraging smile caught his attention, and he took a deep breath, allowing that warmth to bolster his resolve. Let's not shy away from what's hard. What do we fear losing when we reach out? And what might we gain? Debates sparked amidst the participants. Voices layered over each other, offering insights and sharing doubts. Jack found himself watching, both a facilitator and a participant. This wasn't just a forum. It was a space for creation, for growth, both personal and shared. Here he wasn't just reinforcing the idea of connection. He was becoming an embodiment of it. But beneath this burgeoning sense of purpose, threads of anxiety persisted. Was it enough? What if the connections forged in this moment faded into oblivion when they left? Jack felt the weight of expectation press upon him once more. Was he ready to commit to the uncertainty of growth? The intensity of the back and forth drew out deeper fears within him. Could he lead them into something transformative? Would he falter at a critical moment? Noticing how a few participants began to withdraw into themselves during the confrontation, brought his insecurities to the forefront again. As silence blanketed their group temporarily, Jack seized the opportunity. "Why is that vulnerability so frightening?" he asked, his voice soft, but carrying a profound invitation. The question hung palpably, lingering like heavy fog, prompting introspection and clarity. At that moment, he discovered a wellspring of resolve. If there was anything he could offer, it was not just a conversation but a challenge to embrace discomfort, to pursue authenticity amid trepidation. He dared to encourage them to venture beyond their fears, to embrace possibilities even in uncertainty. The energy in the room shifted once again, vibrant like newly blossomed flowers breaking through the soil. He heard small murmurs of agreement. Eyes brightened as their stories collided, layers of shared experiences unraveling. But as the dialogue neared a peak, an unsettling thought crept into his mind. Would this be fleeting? Could he genuinely empower them to sustain this growth beyond today? What would happen when they walked away into their lives, deafened again by the noise of the world? Jack's heart raced as he grappled with a revelation. He yearned for more than just facilitating conversations. He wanted to instill actionable change. The stakes were higher than personal victory. This was about impacting their lives meaningfully, and perhaps even reshaping his purpose. Just as he gathered his thoughts to refocus the directions of their discussions, the doors swung open once more. A figure stepped into the room, drawing everyone's attention. "Sorry I'm late, but I'm here to make things a bit more interesting." Jack's heart sank. Could this newcomer disrupt the delicate equilibrium they had built? What hidden agendas lay beneath this unexpected entrance? As the room teetered between intrigue and agitation, Jack braced himself. The game was about to change. Jack's instinct bubbled with unease as the newcomer's confident presence shifted the atmosphere. His mind raced, scrutinizing every detail of the unfamiliar face. The latecomer appeared unfazed, scanning the room with a sharp eye, and for a moment, Jack felt exposed. Was this person here to challenge him further, or to derail the small victories he had begun to nurture? "Let's increase the stakes," the newcomer said, a slight smirk playing on their lips. "I think we all know that real growth doesn't happen in sweet simplicity. Who's ready for a real challenge?" The room felt electrified. Surprise and curiosity hung in the air. Jack gripped the edge of the table, both intrigued and wary. What kind of challenge was this? Was it a method to provoke their vulnerabilities? Or did this figure have something more sinister in mind? Yet amid the uncertainty, Jack felt an unexpected surge of determination. "Who are you?" Jack managed to ask, his voice carrying a firmness that belied his internal chaos. The newcomer turned their attention to him, a glimmer of amusement dancing in their eyes. "Call me Alex, a facilitator, an innovator, and maybe a bit of a troublemaker. But mostly I'm here to push boundaries. Isn't that what we want?" Alex leaned closer, eyes piercing through the room. "Or do we all want to sit comfortably in our little circle until the moment fades? Comfort leads to stagnation, don't you think?" Jack's heart raced, resonating with the challenge while also feeling a protective instinct over the group he had come to regard, almost reverentially. He recognized Alex's approach, provocative but perilous. The prospect of spontaneity was intoxicating, but held the risks of unraveling the connections he had so carefully tended. "Pushing boundaries can lead to deeper insights," Jack acknowledged, redirecting himself to face the group. "But we should also ensure we navigate this terrain safely. Everyone's comfort matters here." "Ah, comfort," Alex interjected, a theatrical rolling of the eyes accentuating their words. "Comfort is the enemy of growth. I suggest games that strip away those cozy layers. Let's see who's really ready to embrace their truth." Jack's anxiety spiked anew. The groundwork he'd laid was on the verge of collapse, but he had another revelation. He would not let another's agenda dictate how this moment unfolded. He needed to guide the energy, to turn this burgeoning conflict into an opportunity for communal growth rather than discord. "All right, Alex," Jack replied, channeling his lingering apprehension into resolve. "Propose your challenge, but we will do this with respect for each individual's boundaries. Let's ensure this is constructive, not disruptive." The weight of expectation shifted toward Alex, the room pulsating with potential energy. Jack silently rooted for every participant in the room, sensing their hopes and apprehensions as though they were his own. He wanted to give them space not just to explore, but to be transformed. As Alex opened their mouth to outline the challenge, Jack's insides churned. He mentally prepared himself to lead and protect, determining to extract growth even from discomfort. Then came the critical moment. A snap from Alex. A wave of fingers drawing the group's attention. "I want each of you to share something you've never revealed before. Something that terrifies you about opening up. Let's shatter some illusions, shall we?" Jack felt a knot tighten. He had been driving the conversation toward vulnerability, but this demanded more. A raw exposure that could yield both promises and pitfalls. Would everyone be willing? As a tentative silence enveloped the room, Jack looked around, his gaze settling on familiar faces, including Amanda's, who had always encouraged him to take risks. He knew then he could not shy away from this. "Let's do it, but together," he stated, his heart pounding louder. "We'll support each other. Each truth revealed can be a seed for connection, but we must also nurture what grows from it." What he didn't understand was how deeply this challenge would anchor within him, triggering revelations he never anticipated. As the first participant braced to speak, Jack felt the shift in the very fabric of their gathering. A blend of fear and the undeniable stirrings of possibility. What truths would emerge from this challenge? How would they shape the connections Jack had sought to fortify? The stakes had suddenly escalated. With vulnerability awaiting them, Jack braced himself for what lay ahead. As the first participant began to share, Jack felt the room's energy transform. The air was thick with anticipation, each person leaning in, eager, yet apprehensive. "I've always been terrified of not being good enough," a woman confessed, her voice shaking. "It stops me from pursuing my dreams, from applying for positions I know I'd be great at." This admission cracked open a floodgate of honesty. One by one, participants began to voice their fears. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being misunderstood. Jack listened intently, each vulnerability adding layers to the gathering, weaving them into a collective tapestry of shared experiences. Jack marveled at the bravery unfolding before him. It resonated deeply within him. He recalled his son's fearful honesty back in that boardroom. The parallels were unmistakable. As he reflected on his journey, the fears and doubts he'd battled, he felt the firm anchoring of purpose. Encouraging and guiding others while facing those same fears became his burning ambition, not a liability. As the stories continued, Jack realized the challenge Alex presented was catalyzing real shifts among the participants, breaking down walls, fostering trust, and unveiling emotions they had kept buried. Each revelation quelled his apprehension, and he felt gratitude swell within him for every voice brave enough to speak. Finally, it was Jack's turn. The room fell silent, eyes directed at him, expectant and curious. He took a deep breath, his heart racing against the fear lingering in his chest. "I'm afraid of failing. Not just in this endeavor, but as a grandfather, of not being able to inspire Emma or secure opportunities for her." There it was, the raw truth that had shadowed his every step in this journey. The room remained quiet, but Jack felt a connection surge, binding him to the others in a shared support and understanding. With this confession, he felt a weight lift. A myriad of questions filled his mind about how to build support that extended beyond their present moment. How could he establish a follow-up network for these individuals? ensuring that the seeds of courage they sowed today blossomed into genuine action? "Let's commit to one another," Jack suggested, his voice now steady and resolute. "We've shared our truths, but let's also establish a support system. We can meet each month to discuss our progress, our fears, and our achievements, keeping each other accountable and inspired." Amanda chimed in, her excitement infectious. "I think that's a great idea, Jack. We can create a safe space where everyone can express themselves. Maybe even structure it around themes we've discussed today." The room began to buzz with enthusiasm, participants exchanging ideas, each one leaning in closer, feeling the camaraderie solidify. It was as if they had collectively stepped into a new reality, one infused with the promise of solidarity. As the discussions flowed, Jack reveled in seeing everyone ignite with passion and ambition. Ideas bounced between them, and for the first time, he felt he wasn't just facilitating a conversation, but catalyzing authentic change. But Jack still grappled with lingering uncertainty. If they were to establish a regular gathering, how would they maintain momentum? He could feel the weight of leadership pressing down. Sustaining this evolution required continual effort, focus, and creativity. "Let's decide on the next steps tonight," he urged, standing tall as if each word were anchored in commitment. "We can create an outline for our first follow-up meeting. We're not just participants in a single conversation. We're a community now." The vibrant discussion that followed planted the seeds for their inaugural meeting. Jack watched in awe as individuals rallied to share their dreams and aspirations, and slowly the outlines of a vibrant artistic collaboration began to form. By the time they wrapped up, Jack felt a deep sense of fulfillment settle over him. This was it. His achievement wasn't just about confronting ignorance or advocating for change. It was about embodying bravery, fostering connection, and enabling dreams to flourish. He no longer felt like an imposter in his role, but rather a facilitator of something genuine, something monumental. From that day forward, Jack embraced his calling. He transformed his fear into fuel, boldly stepping into his roles as both grandfather and community leader. Together with Amanda and the myriad of voices, he fortified a small yet impactful revolution in the educational landscape, ensuring creativity thrived within their community. In essence, Jack had come full circle. Through confronting fears and championing authenticity, he had created possibilities not just for himself, but for Emma and the whole community they cherished. His past had fueled his journey, and he realized, the change starts with acknowledging one's vulnerabilities and transforming them into strengths. This culmination of small victories cemented Jack's place in a legacy of growth. His heart swelled with gratitude as recognition flooded his conscience. Connecting with individuals on this visceral level had mobilized him, and now he could step confidently into the next chapter of his life and embrace every challenge ahead with open arms. The last resonance of the night settled softly as Jack looked around the room, immersed in the unity and excitement they had all forged together. The moment was nothing short of transformative, and as he drifted away from the forum, a smile graced his face, reflecting a new dawn. He was exactly where he needed to be. Now it's your moment to champion voices like Jack's. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that can transform lives. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and empower more people to witness these journeys of personal overcoming. Comment your reactions and theories about this powerful ending. It's the conversation we need. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You could spark their inspiration to change their narrative. Don't wait even one more second to support incredible storytelling through your engagement. This is how we evolve together.